This is a work session, and after the work session, we're going to go right into our regular meeting. I know we said it would maybe cover some of the questions some people had with the stormwater fee. Does anyone have any questions or wanted to come to the podium on anything? But I know we originally wanted it for that. Go ahead. Go ahead. You can ask a question.
It's about the stormwater fee. If that ordinance and resolution was not advertised, how can you legally charge us? Isn't that what the mayor's using? I mean, I went up and looked. I pulled the case from the pathonetaries. That's his defense against you, that you failed to advertise. So how can you turn around and advertise, or not advertise, the ordinance and resolution for the stormwater and send out bills?
We'll put that question to our solicitor.
Grace, one of the things that I would say, and I think I speak for probably everybody here on this panel right now, that every single one of us has probably received more phone calls, stopped by more people in more different places, even church isn't safe, about the stormwater fee than I can possibly remember. When I was on council back in 1990s, I didn't receive as many phone calls about plowing during severe snowstorms when severe snowstorms hit, and people would call you and say, well, you guys are on council, how my street isn't plowed yet? My street isn't plowed. Well, they're getting there. Which way? So, I mean, we've gotten more calls on this. And I think there are a lot of valid questions that need to be asked about the amount, about how it was computed, about the advertising, about
you and I are on the same
all of
page.
The questions. Yes, I think it all needs to be asked. I'm not a lawyer, so I'm going to stop short of I think what a lot of people would like any one of us on this dais to say. But I am going to say to every single person in the city who's paid or not paid it as of yet, appeal, appeal, appeal it. Make sure that you write in your appeal with every single question that you have on this stormwater. I want the Director of Administration to have to answer your questions. I want him to have to be able to deal with, whether it be through a panel or a board that was going to be appointed, or him, according to the bill that has to deal with this, but I want them flooded because they have to answer to you. We've talked about trying to be clear on everything. This is not. All this is another way that, unfortunately, a council before us was going to say, well, you know what, we can't get as much tax as we want, and so we're going to change it to a stormwater fee. Now, the problem even with that was that, and I just talked to an individual today who's much more up on taxes and reporting taxes than I. But you know what? You can't. If it's a tax, at least, you can get a write-off for the tax on your other tax, state or federal taxes at least. If it's a fee, you don't get that. So the city hurts you in two ways. They needed more money, at least they said they wanted more money to do that, and they didn't even allow you the chance to write anything off. So I would appeal.
My next question, which budget is this located in? And where was the expenditures for the billing noted?
Was it the mayor's budget?
Mayor's budget, but I don't know that even there's a,
No, it's
there's
not.
a billing
None of those budgets,
and a
not
postage.
one of your
I don't
budgets.
think that exists anywhere.
No.
And so I would really, again, question, this is your money. This is your money. So I think you got to ask the questions.
And there's nowhere in that ordinance that you passed that there is a $25 minimum.
Right.
No,
Would somebody show me that?
Or penalty. They don't have
You
a
did not
penalty.
approve a penalty or a late fee, nor did you put a time frame in which it had to be paid.
Right.
And that has to be included, and it's not there. They cannot take anyone anywhere because you have not put that in place. First of all, and I feel it wasn't advertised. My next thing is on the parking garage. I don't know these people. I really don't. But when you rent public or lease public parking, what's the time frame here they want to lease it? Over 10 years, I thought.
10 years.
You're taking the public. I mean, that parking garage was built, what was it built, in the late 60s, early 70s?
I just asked Ralph, it was 70, around 75.
75, okay. I was still in high school. But why would you lease a public parking lot to a private individual? They have the right to lease space, but not the whole parking lot. Or is it the contention is downtown's done totally, and it's only their businesses? I don't know. I'm asking you. Can I have some direction here?
Well, maybe if we get a presentation later on from the people that are intend to do it, we'll get some answers.
Remember the Park and Stamp or Stamp and Park, whatever?
Right.
You'd remember it. Jackie might, basically. Keith wouldn't. Jeannie, you may. Well,
I do.
you know, that's available. Yeah. That way, if they have people in, let them have their parking stamped and pay for it.
Yeah.
Taking the whole parking and then taking, you know, that's just not right for the public as a whole. I'm not anything against anybody here. I'm just looking at that is a public garage.
We have a lot of questions too, Grace. And I'm a person that grew up on the south side. I saw what happened with the south side neighborhood through redevelopment. At that time, I guess they felt they were making good decisions. And in the long run, I believe it hurt the city because you lost businesses on Wyoming Street, plus all the homeowners that lived on the south side of town. That whole area was wiped out. And our train station was taken with it as well. So in the long run, if you saw that piece in the paper, in the Standard Speaker by the Historic Society, they said they believed it hurt the south side and downtown as well. You know, they didn't anticipate what would happen, but you lost the customers, you lost businesses on Wyoming Street.
Now, you're being asked to lease this garage space. Why are you leasing the fire station? Why don't you keep that for storage and so on? And wasn't there a problem with mold in there?
Yes.
Has that been rectified? Then how can you lease it if it hasn't been rectified?
That we'd have to find out.
That I can't answer for you. I do know from talking to some firefighters that was always a problem until they had, and I think even continued. Although I don't want that etched in granite. I know that there was a problem in there for a long time, and I don't know if the heating that was put into the building ever rectified it or not. Was one of the reasons why, once again, that eventually they ended up moving out.
They moved out. And that was the reason that we were told before is why they moved out was because of the issues with the mold, and then they couldn't use the both doors, and they never got the right-of-way for that one door going onto mine because the tracks were supposed to be removed years ago and all that nonsense. I mean, you have to really think back to that, but it's all there. But why are you renting the fire station?
That's a good
Or leasing it?
That's a good question. That's something that has to be answered as well.
Okay. Okay, I hope some of these questions can be addressed. I really do.
Thank you.
And if not, I'd like to see you at least table it for now.
Grace, we would like to address the questions, but the chairs are empty.
The chairs were empty even if they're sitting there.
Oh, it's not my call.
What do you want? Oh, go ahead, Dee.
Dee Deacus, Hazleton. I want to give you a little bit of background of what the parking situation has been in Hazleton. I can remember before the parking garage was even built, it was just a flat parking lot. But what happened was we had several parking lots. We had the parking lot that was between Laurel and Church, and what you did was you built an intermodal / parking garage. The parking garage never materialized, so that whole parking lot that was used for most of the businesses that were on that block just disappeared. And the parking that they replaced it with, where they knocked down that one building next to Can-Do pretty well has all the spaces. So what happens is you've lost a lot of parking there. Plus you lost all the parking that was along Mine Street because besides that parking garage, you lost those spaces. Now the whole thing with the parking garage, all right, you wanted to encourage customers to park at the meters in and out. But you also had them that they used to have that stamp thing where they could go to several businesses and get free parking in the parking garage. So you actually had a way for people to go shopping downtown or going into professional offices and what have you. Now I talked about how you lost all the parking between Laurel and Church. So what happens is a lot of those businesses went into that strip between Laurel and Wyoming as well in the parking garage. And I know that they've gone into it because at 5 o'clock, when I happened to go out around 5, I watched all the people that go to the parking garage that are from the other block. Mainly, now, being that I am familiar with who parks where, you have 2 floors. I'm talking about the Dice Rose McCrory's building. Okay, that is almost totally occupied. They did a very good job of filling that building up. And what you're going to do is most of those people park in the area you want to give up. Right now we have 2 floors dedicated to the community college. Well, a lot of the kids that park for the community college park in the parking garage. So now do we lose our community college? And the bad thing about losing the community college is we're getting young people downtown saying, downtown's not so bad, why are we so afraid of it? But if we take away something that attracts our young people because they go to school and say, well, okay, we don't have any parking, people aren't going to want to go down to that community college anymore, and eventually we'll lose them as tenants. I know the engineering firm has 5 spaces. I see CEO, at least 2 people going there. I see AmeriCar for his business. I see it with a migrant. And these are the people I know. And I know there's other business there where I don't know the people. And now you have no place to park. Now what happens is you're selling the parking space, you're leasing the parking spaces for much lower cost than the parking authority actually leased them at. So we're not really gaining there. Now, a while back you had a proposal that said, well, let's turn Chestnut Street into one-way and we could now have parking on both sides. And making it one-way was a poor decision. But why didn't they come around and say, okay, we'll keep it 2-way and have parking on one side of Chestnut? Nobody came back with that. Nobody came back with all the spaces on Laurel Street that aren't being used. Nobody came back with all the spaces in that little paved parking lot at Greco's that isn't being used. And so what happens is, all right, I understand why Hayden D'Angelo wants the parking garage, because for them it will develop their buildings. But do we do it at a cost of hurting all the other buildings that are there downtown? And the whole thing is, if they're forced out of the garage, out of that parking strip, they're going to go into the meters. And if they go into the meters, you have the meters for customers. So it's going to kill downtown overall. And then to top that off, they do have a lot of parking. That parking lot right next to me, between the Marco building and my building, is not even half full. So I don't understand why they're saying that we need to take away all this parking, monopolize it, at the expense of other businesses, buildings losing their right to park. And this is one of the things. Now, I might have been against a robo-garage, but I was never against a regular garage where you go up and down, the non-robo, because I don't think the city could maintain a robo-garage, quite honestly. But it doesn't mean they couldn't have put a garage at that corner. And this is the whole thing. What you're doing is you're shifting the haves and the have-nots downtown into who gets the right to park. And that's a bad thing. You know, are we going to say all those businesses established themselves in that business exchange building? Well, too bad. We have another building we love more, and we're going to say you're out of luck. And that's not right. Thank you.
Excuse me. Thank you.
I would suggest one thing on that, and I can't answer all the questions. Again, I think some of the questions may be able to be answered later as we go through this in the regular meeting. But I do remember, and there were always about 20 spaces, parking spaces, that would have been across the street from where your building is right now, that sat between the security savings and the Leader Store building. But there was always a chain there, so no one was ever really able to park there. But for years, those parking spaces existed, but nobody was able to utilize them. and that was a shame.
I think Greco wasn't allowed to use it as a parking lot, if I'm not mistaken.
I'm not, that part I'm not even familiar with, but the simple fact was that there was space there, and it went unused.
Yeah, they weren't
Yeah.
allowed to use it as a they weren't allowed to have a private parking lot.
Okay.
Yes, to expand on what Grace said about the stormwater, I don't understand, first of all, before a stormwater ordinance was even suggested, why wasn't there a public meeting held as directed by the DEP Stormwater Management Act? That was number one right there. Also, was anybody in the former majority of council or in the administration aware that the county has this Act 167 stormwater management plan? Were they aware? Because there is one. It was actually enacted in June of 2010. And it says on Part B in Plan Number 1 of the Act 167 Stormwater Management Plan, Luzerne County, municipal adoption of ordinance to implement the plan. The Act 167 Stormwater Management Plan model ordinance provided with this plan is a single-purpose stormwater ordinance that can be adopted by each municipality. All municipalities are required to adopt the model ordinance or amend existing ordinances to be consistent with the standards and criteria set forth in this plan. If municipalities do not have the capabilities to review the plans for consistency with the standards and criteria set forth in this plan, it shall be the municipality's responsibility to designate a representative organization that is capable of completing the review on the municipality's behalf. Each municipality shall adopt or amend and shall implement such ordinances and regulations, including zoning, subdivision and development, building code, and erosion and sedimentation ordinances as are necessary to regulate development within the municipality in a manner consistent with the applicable stormwater plan and the provisions of the Act. Act 167 requires that this be accomplished within 6 months of the plan's adoption and approval. Model ordinance provisions will be distributed to all the municipalities. The Luzerne County Planning Commission will be available upon request to assist municipalities in the adoption of the model ordinance provisions to fit particular municipal ordinance structures. The primary county level activity will be the establishment of review procedures. The model ordinance calls for review of stormwater management plans by a qualified professional, evidence that the appropriate state and federal agencies responsible for administering wetland regulatory programs have been contacted for land development sites contain regulated wetlands is also required. The purpose is to ensure that the plan standards have been applied appropriately and that downstream impacts have been adequately addressed. Procedures and capabilities for performing the review function exists within the government agencies. So basically what happened is the city, or I don't want to say city engineer, the engineering consultant to the mayor and the city solicitor failed to do their homework and basically enact a fee, which is really just a tax gimmick wrapped in an ordinance. So, and also if the solicitor, following up with what Grace said about the solicitor, it says in the solicitor's handbook provided by the state, it says it refers to the exclusions to enforcing the stormwater ordinance if the stormwater system is tied to the existing sewer lines. It says exclusions. Combined storm and sanitary sewer systems connected to a sewage treatment plant are not subject to these rules. Dischargers of stormwater runoff combined with municipal sewage are point sources that must obtain NPDES permits requiring secondary treatment unless special policies apply. For example, in some cases, treatment may not be required for combined sewer overflows, otherwise known as CSOs. Those permit requirements are also subject to federal, state, or citizen enforcement. Waters of the United States used to carry stormwater may not be regarded as discharges in certain cases, but as conveyances instead. It also refers to, in the solicitor's handbook, as a course of action. If the municipality does not have an Act 169 stormwater plan to make sure that code enforcement, land use planning, and zoning boards update the procedures as they implement stormwater management programs requirements as they are adopted. And even if the lines were separated under the stormwater ordinance, it must comply with DEP guidelines to include the calculations as defined in the Basic Management Practices Manual, or otherwise known as BMP Manual, and the model ordinance provided by them. Also, DEP guidelines and the Luzerne County Stormwater Management Act 169 plan says that all municipalities must comply with the county plan. So does this ordinance is this in compliance with the county plan?
Trying to follow you with everything on there, just listening. I think what you're talking about is stormwater management plans and what was passed as the stormwater fee are two completely different things.
Really?
What you're talking about is basically overall stormwater management is in regards as to when there's buildings and everything else that goes on. You're talking about wetlands, you're talking about a lot of things in there. And I was trying to follow everything.
But Keith, there's only one DEP Stormwater Management Act.
Right, that's the Stormwater Management Act. The fee was the two things are completely are different things to look at.
Okay, then why was it called a Stormwater Management Ordinance? Then why was the city's ordinance called?
I don't know about that thing from 2010. I know that there was some. I was made aware of that from someone. I don't know who it was, if it was the solicitor, or if it was Dominic, or who it was. As far as that goes, I don't know if they put that in place 6 months after 2010 when it was passed. I have no idea. I wasn't here.
I know that.
Yeah, there is.
Yeah, there's one. It was one passed in 2011.
Okay, it was passed in 2011.
But it refers back to it. It does refer back to it. This ordinance that was just passed, the one with the fee, or one actually with the fee, separate from the ordinance.
I would need to look at that and the other thing together, but I can't give you a definitive answer right now. Just trying to, I don't know how many pages you just read off.
Well, I consolidated into 2 pages, but there's a ton of material.
I know. And when they're talking about, I've taught environmental science for 15 years. When they're talking about stormwater management plans, that's a lot different than what that stormwater fee was. So
So then, what was the fee intended for? I don't know. I'm confused.
Stormwater. What I said to them when that was put in place was that I wanted that fee to be able to improve stormwater management. So all the things that the stormwater ends up causing problems with, roadways, etc. What I wanted when I was talking to the mayor about it was that to go into an actual fund to be able to fix the problems that we have because of storms.
Okay, so what you're saying is, as far as it's the same thing it's stated in the Stormwater Management Act, that it must be in a dedicated fund for stormwater management. So you are talking about the same thing then, because what you're saying is what the Stormwater Management Ordinance was intended is to manage the stormwater the runoff. And that's basically what this is in regards to. What I'm saying and what you're implying as far as what the stormwater management ordinance was intended for is the same thing.
Okay. And still, I mean, I need to look at what you're reading.
Yeah, I think.
As far as what was discussed, I mean, I let that up to the solicitor and the person that was writing it, and I'm not an expert when it comes
If
to
I could jump in for a second, I think what's happening here is that, yes, there was a separate stormwater ordinance, and I read that, and that was passed, I believe, back in,
She
I
just
think
said
it was May of
2011.
last year, if I'm not mistaken, or sometime in there around, or in the
Right.
summertime. And there was to be a stormwater fee that was to be added to that to take care of the maintenance.
Right.
Now, that was a whole separate thing, I understand that. But one of the things that, I mean, one leads to the other, because if you're going to do stormwater management, then the logical thing to do was to have some kind of, well, how are we going to pay for this? But that became one of the questions, because, again, if it was only to be new stuff that was to come hereafter, then there wasn't a need to. You're right, there was to be a dedicated fund for this. That raises another issue. As people have been speaking here, I've been jotting down all these notes. I've now come up with 12 things to make your appeal on, but I'll read those later. But the fact is that what you're talking about was a dedicated fund to take care of what was to come next. But unfortunately, what's now happened is that the fee has become the bone of contention. I don't think it's the stormwater ordinance at all, but it's now how do you pay for it, what do you do with it, and when does it take effect? And in there lies the big problem,
Now-
and that's a dedicated fee.
Now, let
And
me
unfortunately,
jump
what ended up happening is that, and I think one of the things, the bone of contention with a lot of people across town, they already said that this is not in a dedicated fee. This is going into the general fund. And in there, again, lies another reason for appeal.
One of the other things, you read Mark, yeah, it's supposed to be, if it's a combined system, all roads in Hazleton basically lead to Rome. I had the sewer authority here. We had a discussion. This went on for months, all right? One of our major problems, and this is why we're doing the Button Buck project, up in the terrace, the lines were supposed to be separated, a storm and a sewer. Unfortunately, the tap-ons, not because of the people, because they paid their fee, were done incorrectly. Due to that fact, there was contamination of the Hazel Creek property, the creek.
Then
okay?
why wasn't DEP contacted?
Now, yes, we ended up having to do, or going to do the Button Buck project, which is going to put a piece of equipment in there that separates the solids from the liquids. So therefore, because they were hooked up improperly, okay, the sewer line was actually hooked up to the storm line. So we have two sewer lines running through the terrace and Hilltop and that whole area up there. Now, that was one of the first areas, I believe, that were being separated, supposedly, but it didn't work out that way. Now we have this problem that needed to be corrected. They are doing it. They believe they got a grant for it. There's also another area that we have in the city that is going to be corrected with the same type of equipment because of the sewage running into a creek area. So those are the two main areas. But in that process, what I discovered was all roads lead to Rome. Because of Button Buck project and Hazel Creek being contaminated, the water from the terrace and Hilltop, it was diverted into a weir on Mill Street, which takes it directly to the sewer authority. All right. Trying to figure out how many lines we actually have that are combined and separated was nearly impossible. I had the original engineer report when this first started and the minutes when he attended this meeting, when he stated that The system in Hazleton is hundreds of years old, and they are all combined, all right?
Gene, why wasn't this, dealt with? I'm not even
I
going to
brought
go
this
as far
up-
as with.
I brought this up-
It's not even about even when Keith was in the majority. This
I
is going
brought
back. This is going back even when, back in 2010 when the county implemented the plan.
I brought this up all through this past year as I was discovering more and more and talking with the sewer authority and discovering the problems that were occurring and what needed to be done to address them. And that was one of the problems I had. As far as I was concerned, most of this all leads down to the sewer authority anyhow. This is why they have an overload of water coming in, and they had a problem with DEP, and they had to address it because they were being inundated with all this excess water, which they weren't anticipating. It was supposedly to go to Hazel Creek, okay? Because of all these concerns and whatnot, I felt a stormwater fee wasn't necessary at the time until the work was properly going to be put in place, that we were seeing these things addressed. They showed all about the inlets and the catch basins being bad in the city. We were paying our out of our sewer transmission fund $150,000 every year for sewer inlet and repair work, which tells me when you saw those pictures in the newspaper that the work wasn't being done and the money wasn't being utilized the way it was supposed to be. The people are having a problem with the fee part of it right now. I agree.
But what's the end result then,
I
Gene?
didn't see a penalty. I agree with David as far as appeal. I think, and I'm not going to say anything bad against Keith, I think he went into this with good faith. He knew that these problems had to be corrected, and he did it with the best intentions. Unfortunately, the way our system works sometimes, when you start uncovering things and pulling out a thread, you discover more and more and more problems, and this is what had transpired.
But my concern is, okay, under the same DEP or the Stormwater Management Act, what is going to be the end result? Because now that we've enacted a stormwater ordinance, and under the Stormwater Management Act, it says that once a municipality enacts the stormwater ordinance, that if the municipality does not comply with the plan, then the first time would be just that they would be warned, and then the second time would be
Mark,
the state treasurer would go and recommend that they withhold the general funding.
we need answers. We need answers from the mayor. We need answers from the solicitor. We need answers from the city administrator.
But you realize the road that it can lead to is the DEP
yes.
can recommend to the state treasurer to withhold general fund money, which would go towards
Yes.
paying the police, paying fire, running the city.
And these are the concerns, and this is what I'm saying. We needed to address these concerns. We don't get any cooperation, all right, to the point where this is why we put a solicitor on for ourselves, because we needed to get responses. We needed to answer these questions. We are left with a bag of questions that all the constituents have, and we have no way to reply to them, all right? And that's wrong.
But this should have been thought of before this, because that's why you have a public meeting. That's why you have the county should have been conferred with, and as far as the planning goes.
And let me just suggest this.
This is why this council reinstituted work sessions, so that these things can come out and be discussed.
What about implementing the planning commission, reinstating the planning commission, because the planning commission is the advisory board that goes to in front of you guys, in front of council.
And there are a lot
We-
of things
we
that are involved in this, with zoning, with planning commission, and all that. That unfortunately, right now, and I'm going to be honest with you, I was enlightened this afternoon about a lot of things about zoning, but more importantly, with the planning commission. And the planning commission, unfortunately, needs some work on it. And it's not the good people who are still serving on there. And who just recently left. It is a panel that has been able to meet once this year. And part of that reason is because there are only 2 people left on it. And I would hope that the mayor would appoint some very good and diligent people who are concerned about the community and are concerned about the future of this city, because that's what the Planning Commission is. It is not just a board.
It's another
or a
shelf
commission
board.
that-
It's another shelf board. That's the problem.
And that's not what it should be. It should be a board that sees the vision of this city and is there to approve or disapprove of what goes on in this city. Now, part of the reason that you bring that on up with the Planning Commission and your hearing and all that, and I agree with you, that may be, again, another reason, because none of those were met, that even the ordinance itself, if you were to challenge it, would be ruled illegal. And so I understand what you're saying about what we could be done in being hurt by the state. And what I would say to you is that we need to get all of the answers that we can, all of the actions that we can to make sure that we prove to the state that you know what, this wasn't done right. This wasn't done right. And again, you know, it comes from the leadership. Okay? It comes from the leadership, and we've all seen where that leadership is. That comes from the leadership. And unfortunately, what's happening right now is that too much of this city and too many of the boards and the commissions and the authorities are being left to just flounder. They're not doing what they've been asked to do.
Well, look at the
Some
state of the
well-known
city's
ones are,
infrastructure.
but you know what?
But look
And
at the state of
that's-
the city's infrastructure.
Ex-
That tells
and
the
I
whole
agree with you.
story.
I agree with you.
Because if you don't have a blighted properties committee, you don't have a redevelopment authority that works, you don't have a planning commission that works, the zoning board is just basically left to its own devices because they have nothing to fall back on, then, you know, of course you're going to have a city infrastructure that's decaying and dilapidating.
Right. It doesn't all come from the office over there. There are many parts of the city government that need to work in conjunction with one another for a city to run and move ahead. It does not come from one seat. It does not come from one office.
No man is an
It comes
island.
from a number of different groups who are going to dedicate their time as planning commission, zoning commission, authorities and boards, the ones that you've mentioned before, nuisance and blighted community boards. These are the ones that need to be put.
Well, the nuisance abatement
and
board just
unfortunately, you
was
saw what's
enacted.
happened so far.
Yeah.
Okay? Do we need to mention any more?
No.
We know where we're at. We know what we need to move and go ahead.
But the nuisance abatement board, I was going to allude to that as far as that's been enacted as of last week. The nuisance abatement
Right.
board is allowed to be now enacted by you guys, which could deal with all of the nuisances that we have. And we've heard from many meetings that,
Right.
you know, how much garbage is laying around, abandoned cars, properties that are unkempt. So I would like to see that enacted, and I pretty much have a plan to do that, but, you know, that's up for the, you know, public to see, and I would like to see a public meeting on
Work with
the
us.
city, yeah, for
Work
this.
with us,
Yes.
and we will do the best that we can. Now, I can't, nor Jeff, nor Jackie, nor Jeannie, nor Keith, deal with what that empty seat over there would say. But I'm going to tell you right now that you've got an attentive board here. You've got an attentive board here. I believe that we're here to try and do what's best and move this city ahead. And I don't care what it is that we have to do, we will do our best.
I hope so, Dr. Sosar, because here's the problem. Since 2011, we've had 150 properties go vacant.
Right.
And that's a loss of the tax base to the city. It makes more nuisance for, you know, the adjoining adjacent properties, for the neighbors that have to deal with the vacant properties, and also it makes things tougher on the police and also on the fire, because once you have vacant properties go vacant for a while, then they become hazards, like we saw on McKinley Street.
Right.
So this is what the problem is. And I think we need to deal with this decisively, because if we don't, the town we know will be like Johnstown, which is they're calling the city of abandonment. And I don't want that. I don't think anybody wants that.
No.
So let's do something.
We're trying.
All right, thanks.
What am I?
Norman Tarantino. Couple things, Councilman. First thing is, what is the air clearance for building a bridge over the train tracks, and who controls the airspace that would put up such a bridge? Is that owned by the railroad, or is that owned by the city? Who controls the airspace for putting up a construction project like that in the city?
Question.
That's probably a legal question. We'll have to put that to our
I
solicitor.
think it's 22 and a half feet.
So that's something that needs to be...
You know, like, go ahead, answer
I
it.
think it's 22 and a half feet above the train tracks.
I think somebody was supposed to have investigated that with
But who owns the
Northern
airspace?
Suffolk.
Does it have you got, even though it has to be 22 and a half feet, you still have to get permission from the train company to build over their space? And who owns the, basically, if I want to build on top of the Marco Bank building, if I get a permission from Mr. Hayden, I could build an extension. That's because he owns the airspace above the building.
I believe that was taken care of last year when I wasn't on council. I think I remember them coming and they said Norfolk Southern was doing this. They had a special exemption because it was like 6 inches difference. I believe that was. But it was. I believe it was taken care of before the plans went in for their grant.
The other,
No, I didn't get any information.
Go ahead.
the other thing is, now that we have a major abandoned building in the city at what was St. Joseph's Hospital, since that project has been left to hang, has the city checked the building, see if it's been stripped out, if there's anything even left if it's sold or whatever happens to it? Has there been a report of what the condition of the building is at this point? Is somebody going to make sure it's inspected and we find out what the status of the building is after they started and left, or what's going on with the property?
We're gonna have the chief check that out.
Yeah, or Rick, he's standing right there.
Yeah, we will have that checked out. Thank you.
Good. The other thing is, what about some realistic users' fees that the city could get to help with their income? Like in Schuylkill County, they charge people that are arrested $125 to get their fingerprints processed. What other type of realistic user fees could we impose in the city for different people that would not be a tax, like people are crawling, saying that the water fee is? Because isn't that really a hidden user fee when you look at it as being not really a tax? So why can't we charge the people that are processed by the city police $125 for their fingerprinting like they're doing in Schuylkill County?
I think that's a good idea. We'll look into that, Norman.
Great. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Judy Dowd, Hazleton. Most of what I wanted to address about the parking garage has already been addressed, but the main thing that has me quite upset is this is what we're dealing with daily, and I have a whole bag full of this, falling on our vehicles for the bargain price of $55.50 for a rental spot. Now we're going to refurbish the garage, remodel it, and charge $30 for those same spots, when this is what people that are paying $55.50 are dealing with falling on their vehicle. And this is a daily occurrence, no matter where you park in the garage.
We had taken a walk through there with you a while back in the springtime, and you had shown us a number of different areas. Many of those areas are still getting more.
It's worse.
Obviously, it's just.
It's much worse. From the winter we had, I think, from the extreme cold and then the heat, it's gotten much worse.
And this winter would be the winter of discontent that would have caused more than usual
Just
damage.
today, I picked up in a small area throughout the garage, I have a bag there full of this type of thing, and you could even see the rust on the cement from the steel that's supposed to be holding that garage up underneath.
Right.
So this is what I'm not understanding, how we could refurbish a structure, eliminate, it's a public building, and at that point we're telling us who can park there and who can't, and it is a public building, and then the people that have parked there for years, and I'm one of them, paid $55.50 a month for this kind of stuff, and you're going to refurbish it and charge $30 a parking spot. That makes no sense whatsoever.
If I can ask one more question, because we had walked through there with you before. Where you live, is there any other place where you are able to park except that parking garage?
We don't have enough parking spaces. The big problem is, where you run into a problem is in the winter. On Juniper Street, because of the Hazleton housing being opposite the Center City Apartments. This year the plowing was to the Hazleton Park, the Hazleton housing. So you could park along Juniper toward the Center City apartments. Next year, when they reverse that, you can't park at all in front of the Hazleton housing due to the fact of ambulances coming in, that type of thing. Right. So you can't park there. Chestnut Street, you can't park on either side, where that street is definitely large enough to have two-way traffic and parking on either one or both sides. Now I'm understanding that the lot that the transit authority or the parking authority owns on Chestnut Street is going to be all metered. Well, that's ridiculous too, because if you have a business downtown, how many people in the winter are going to go out every 2 hours and plug a meter? I mean, that's not even reasonable. And yet most of the parking spots for the garage are going to be pre-rented when this garage is remodeled. And that's not really fair to the people who have patronized the garage all this time. Okay. So that's all, all I have to say with it, but, see what you can do with that.
Thank you.
Any other questions concerning our work session for the stormwater fee? Okay, with that, we'll just go right into our meeting. Our meeting